So lelo kuli nkhani kulu kwambiri, nkhani kuzana ndi kafukufuku wa ndege yomwe idapha achilima komanso ndi anthu ena okwana 8. Chabwino. So Mungu ndisita kupasa ndi video, Mungu yang'anako pang'ono. Chimene chinachitika chonena kuti panachitika kafukufuku umene adachita nda a bungwe la ku Germany BFU. So kafukufuku jana lembeto bwino ndi pano pali Minister of Justice, right, Charles Mhango, amene anabwera ndithu Parliament kuli ma MP ndi kupereka report kumano kukulu kwake akuti iwowa adawuzidwa ndi APM Professor Arthur Peter Mutharika kuti aliyang'ane bwino report licha alizukute bwino akalizukuta ndi lipereke ma ansala ku zinthu zina zimene sezina report chesinapereke chifukwa report licha limapereka mafunso ena komanso silimayankhaso mafunso ena. Okay, so iwowa anali ndi kuwerenga kwa inquiry yawo komanso analandiranso ndithu mafunso ena ndi ena. So zina mwa izo ndizonena kuti iwowa akuti aonamo ma gap ambiri komanso ma faults, mavuto ambiri mu report licha limene sakumveka bwino kuti chikuchitika nchani. For example, akuti Chakwera anatuma Saulos Chilima pitani kumaliro a Ralph Kasambara, okay, former Attorney General mnthawi ya Joyce Banda. Mupite kumaliro a Ralph Kasambara amene nayenso anafa mosadziwika bwino ku lodge. Ndiye kumapezeka kuona kuti ndege yora kwanga za mavuto, ndege imembekezeka kuti ifike ku Mzuzu airport pa 2 minutes past 10. Musunge nthawi nkhani kukafukufuka malo apena paliponse. 2 minutes past 10 ama imembekezeka kuti ifike itere ku Mzuzu. Chabwino. Koma Mario sanali ku Mzuzu, Mario anali ku Nkhata Bay, right? Kumene amenera kuti Mario anali ku Nkhata Bay, kumene amenera kuti akwereso galimoto and ulendo umene umatenga ma minutes 30 to 35. So mukaphatikiza 2 minutes past 10, right? 2 minutes past 10 ndi kuphatikiza ma minutes awa 30 kapena 35, mupeza kuti achilima amembekeza kuti akafike chamma to 11, quarter to 11 ku Nkhata Bay kuja akaphatikizaso ndi mtundu wa galimoto. Chabwino. So achilima ali ngati vice president atumidwa ndi Dr. Lazarus Chakwera, former president, president awatuma. Koma kumene kuja itakwana 10 koloko ali kunodzuka munthu nkuyenera kuti apa mmene zilili mu mwamba kuti uyambe chifukwa a vice president achidulapo kaye. And okay, pamene nthawi imene ikuyembekezereka kuti even atere ku Mzuzu sinakwana. Amene ndakwere aime 2 past 10 komanso ukoko amembekeza akafika chamma quarter to 11. So 10 koloko munthu ayimakale ulendo wachedwalapo nde sizingatheke kuti atani afike ndi mwambo 10 tuyambeni. Akuti pamene paja pamene sipano anthu anamba kudabwa kuti kuti akula kuchitika nchani kuti, right? Koma akuti munthu amene amapanga announcement imeneyi akuti sana mutchule, komanso munthu yonso sanamfunse mafunso chifukwa ameneyo amadziwa zambiri. Ndakuti report ili silokwanira kwenikweni, muli zinthu zambiri. Nkhani ina anakamba nkhani ukhudzana ndi tena kuchani nkhani ina, okay, panali nkhani zingapo komanso Felix Njawalaso anafunsa mafunso kuti kodino tofuna mutiuzeko kuti zingathe kuti nkwale imeneyi mufufuze za ubale pakati pa achilima ndi Chakwera kuti ubale waona limotani. komanso milandu imene amakhululukira yokhuza ndi ku MDF chima mazengedwa milandu eti yogulisa zida amakuti kuti firusa ta yogula zida kaya. So komano mapepala amene mlandu mapepala amene anali ku MDF anali obisidwa sanali public yake, anali obisidwa ati facha zina ndi zina. Ndama ati a Felix Njawala bwanji tifufuzepo apa makamaka inuyo ubale wa Chakwera ndi Chilima unali motani. Definitely awo a Charles Mhango ayankha kwenda kuti zimenezo ndithu sizikukhudzana ndi kafukufuku imwena. Komano I mean I don't know. Koma munthu akamwalira tingoyerekeza munthu akaphedwa kabana munthu amwalira masadziwika bwino imfa ikufufuzidwe. Choyambirira anthu amafufuza kaye kuti kodi munthu uyu ngati linali banja amafufuza kati kuti amakhala bwanji. Yeah. Kuti kufufuza kwambire palipo kodi Achilima ndi Lazarus Chakwera amakhala bwanji kukhala kwawo. So muli zinthu zambiri katemo. So guys, I know it's just a little bit longer. Komano, yeah, ndiyesa kuti zimene ndi Charles Mhango lero ku Parliament. So guys, thank you so much.
The Right Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly to impanel an ad hoc committee to investigate further into the matters of the plane crash that happened on the 10th June 2024 at Ntungwa. With your permission, therefore, Chairperson, if you may permit me to refer to the report which I submitted to His Excellency the President, as well as to refresh my memory on what I said in Parliament when I was asked. I should say, Honorable Chairperson and all members, that I am not a witness of facts, in that I may not say in my capacity as Minister of Justice that I saw this happen or I witnessed this. I'm not that kind of witness. I believe I'm a witness who's come to set the stage to advise this committee on what informed His Excellency the President to impanel or indeed request the August House or Parliament to go into this inquiry that your committee is doing from this morning. I believe that's the purpose that I am here. And if that is my understanding, Honorable Chairperson and members, with your permission, I may not have to go word for word in what I said, but with your permission, I may have to go and summarize my findings and what informed my findings to advise Excellency the President on the way forward, whether or not to reopen the inquiry into the plane crash which killed the former Vice President, late Right Honorable Saulos Klaus Chilima, and 8 others at Ntungwa in Chikangawa on 10th June 2024. Let me confirm to this committee, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable members, that I reviewed the 3 main reports into the crash which happened on the 10th June 2024. Let me also at the outset mention the fact that I was informed when I was reviewing the 3 reports that there were other reports and other documentation or material which were not made available to me. For example, I can cite 2 of the materials that I was informed. I was informed that there was a report which was confidential by the MDF board. I was also informed that there was another report by the Civil Aviation. Let me state to this committee, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable members, that these two reports were not made privy to me. I was also made aware when I was going through the report of the Commission of the Inquiry set up by the former President, His Excellency Dr. Lazarus Chakwera. In that report, I read that the witnesses who testified, some of them brought other materials. Those materials, I'm not privy to them. So my findings and my analysis concentrated on 3 reports, and these reports are: number 1, the interim report issued by what was called the BFU. BFU is a German organization called Bundesstelle für Flugverramtechtung. That's German. Let me say that I'm not very good in German, so my pronunciation may not be the best pronunciation. Therefore, I'll just refer it to as the BFU. But let me say that I speak a little bit of German. The second report, Honorable Chairperson, was the report of the Commission of Inquiry, Presidential Commission of Inquiry, set up by His Excellency, the former President, His Excellency Dr. Lazarus Chakwera. I also reviewed that report extensively. Finally, Honorable Chair, I also did review the final report of the BFU. For purposes of factual background, I thought necessary, Chairperson, that I should give a little bit of a detail from the report of the BFU for factual consistency, because the facts that come in the interim BFU report will almost be the same that informed all the 3 reports: the interim report of the BFU, the report of the Commission of Inquiry, and the final report of the BFU. Let me also say that if you go to the report of the Commission of Inquiry, apart from the facts of the flight and the technical aspects, the Commission of Inquiry set up by the former President also looked at other witnesses on the ground, both at Kia and at Mzuzu Airport, which was the destination of that fateful flight. But as I said earlier on, Honorable Chairperson, I thought that it would be important for this committee to understand what informed my findings, to have a little bit of detail of what factual background was contained in the BFU report in terms of how the flight started, how it was prepared, up to the time of the quote-unquote the crash at around 16 minutes past 10 on 10th June 2024. I thought those facts are very important so that we can link those facts to the Commission of Inquiry report as well as to the final report to understand what informed my opinion on those 3 reports. With your permission, Honorable Chair, if that methodology for this morning is correct or is acceptable, I'm prepared to give a detail of some background that was contained in the interim report. With your permission, Chair.
Honorable Minister, we can proceed on that basis.
Thank you very much. Honorable Chair and honorable members, the facts that came from the BFU interim report that this committee may wish to have in detail are as follows. 1. The interim report by the BFU was a very brief report. It had only 19 pages. And these 19 pages included the abstract, the factual information, personal information of the pilots, the aircraft information, meteorological information, Malawi airspace structure, radio communications, flight recorder, wreckage, and impact information. It also had a little bit of aspects on the survival aspects and safety, and made safety recommendations in the appendix of the report. My reading of the BFU report interim showed that the BFU relied on the testimonies of the flight information officer at Muzuzu Airport and the controller at Kamuzu International Airport in Lilongwe. The BFU also used its own analysis of the GPS data, which was tracking the aircraft, to come up with its interim report. Let me mention that I'm referring to the GPS data as being the analysis deliberately. Why? Because as you will see or hear later on in the report, the aircraft did not have, according to the BF report, certain technical components that could track the aircraft in terms of the ladder, cockpit voice recorder. Those things the aircraft didn't have, according to the BFU report. Therefore, the BFU relied on the GPS data to track the aircraft from Kia to the point of impact at 16 minutes past 10 hours on the 10th June 2024. Honorable Chairperson and members, as regards the aircraft information, the BFU interim report simply stated that the airplane had a certificate of registration by the Republic of Malawi and was operated by the Malawi Air Force. You can see that at page number 7 of the interim report. Let me say, Honorable Chair, that earlier on, your committee had requested me to finish to your committee the 3 reports, which I did. I hope your committee has had a look at these 3 reports. However, I have my raw reports with my notes here with me. But these ones contain my handwritten notes when I was reviewing those reports. But the clean ones I handed over to the committee much earlier. The interim report did not include the aspects of airworthiness of the aircraft. However, using the GPS data analysis, the BFU interim report gave a detailed history of the flight on the fateful day, especially after departing Kamuzu International Airport. The BFU report noted and recorded that the aircraft took off at 09:16 hours, 16 minutes past 9 in the morning, and it took off from runway number 14 at Kia. I want the committee to note the departure time, 16 minutes past 9 in the morning on 10th June 2024, and it departed from runway number 14. The BFU did not indicate the estimated time of arrival at the destination aerodrome at Muzuzu. However, it said that at 17 minutes past 9, the aircraft began a left-hand turn, and 2 minutes later, the aircraft ended in a northern direction turn. That was within a minute or 2 of its departure. According to the controller at Kia, the flight crew received clearance that's for communication, to FL90. But later, the flight crew requested to maintain 7,000 feet AMSL. These are technical terms, meaning the height above sea level. The GPS data showed that at 23 minutes past 9, the plane reached a cruising level of about 7,300 feet above sea level. It had been cleared to cruise at 7,000 feet above sea level, but at 23 minutes past 9, it reached 7,300 feet above the sea level. Those heights are very important later on as to what the plane will be doing. So please, members of the committee, take note of the heights. The flight crew informed the controller that they would reach reporting NASA at 9:23. That's where now they say we are now level, we are now going straight. They're quite reporting NASA in their technical. And the airport of destination approximately at 5 minutes past 10. So they were reporting that once they reach reporting NASA at 9:32, they would reach the destination airport, the aerodrome at Mzuzu, at 5 minutes past 10 in the morning on that morning. According to the GPS data, the airplane was flying north, and at 9:32 hours, it was 3 nautical miles west of West Point, NASA, at about 7,500 feet above sea level. 7,500 feet above sea level. At 9:37 hours, the airplane began to climb, and within 3 minutes, it reached about 8,600 feet above sea level. At about 9:44 hours, the airplane entered descent. At 9:50 hours, at about 1.5 nautical miles northwest of the village Fumbawowa, somewhere in Mzimba, Fumbawowa village, it began to deviate. It began to deviate from the direct course to the airport of destination by entering a left-hand turn. So the airport was leaving the normal course that it was supposed to take, and it went to the left at around the village of Fumbawowa in Mzimba. At 9:52 hours, during the left-hand turn, at about 5,500 feet above sea level. So you can actually see that now it's descending from around the 8,600, it's now around 5,500 feet. The airplane began to climb again. With a track of about 150 degrees, the left-hand turn ended, and the airplane turned right in western direction, and at 9:55 hours, it reached 8,100 feet above sea level. I want you to understand the maneuvers that are taking place there according to BFU. At 9:56, the aircraft flew a full left-hand turn, like going round and round. Continued in a southwest direction, and at about 9:58 hours, it passed the settlement called Bokosi Kunga. 1 minute later, it began to turn right, and within 1 minute, it reached an eastern heading, then turned to a northeastern heading. The aircraft descended again to an altitude of about 5,400 feet, about 460 feet AGL. AGL means above the ground, not above sea level, but above ground level. So it went as low as 460 feet AGL. At approximately 2 nautical miles south of a wood industry plant in the forest, the airplane turned left in climb to the north. Between 6 minutes past 10 and 9 minutes past 10, about 3 nautical miles northwest of Chikangawa city, the aircraft flew full left turns, not just one, full left turns, with a radius of about 600 meters. And while doing so, it was between 500 feet and 200 feet above ground level. 500 feet and 200 feet above ground level. In my understanding, my layman's understanding, it came very close to the ground. At about 9 minutes past 10, the airplane continued the flight with various headings in the northeastern direction and then descended to 185 feet above ground level, below 200, 185 feet above ground level, and then began to climb again. At about 12 minutes past 10, mark that time, 12 minutes past 10, the airplane was about 25 nautical miles southwest of Muzuzu Airport, at about 7,000 feet above sea level, which is now about 1,500 feet above ground level. It has gone up again. 2 minutes later, it reached about 2,200 feet above ground level. Then it turned in a northern direction and descended again. At about 15 minutes past 10, quarter past 10, the airplane turned left in a northwest direction. Finally, it had a track of about 284 degrees, and at 16 minutes past 10, the airplane impacted the ground. I repeat, finally, it had a track of about 284 degrees, and at 16 minutes past 10, the airplane impacted the ground. The interim BFU report did not make any findings as to why the pilots deviated from the direct course to the airport of destination. However, it was the flight information officer at Muzuzu Airport who told the BFU that since the flight crew had not reported in about 9:50 hours, he contacted them by radio to no avail. And 5 minutes later, he tried again, but both attempts failed. At 5 minutes past 10, the flight information officer at Muzuzu called the Lilongwe Air Control Center to have the estimated arrival time of the airplane confirmed again. At 12 minutes past 10, the flight crew had then reported in on the Muzuzu Tower frequency and informed the Air Control Information Officer that they were 20 nautical miles away and intended an approach from the north. The flight information officer communicated the weather information and that runway 17 was in use in Muzuzu. He also informed them about his observation that the east, south, and west of the airport visibility was about 5 kilometers. The flight crew had wanted to fly towards Ekwendeni to see if the weather conditions were better there. At 17 minutes past 10, he had contacted the flight crew by radio to find out about their attitude, but he did not receive any answer. Mind you, by 16 past 10, the aircraft had impacted the ground, and the controller was calling them at 17 minutes past 10, and there was no answer. It should be observed that the flight was supposed to land at Muzuzu at about 2 minutes past 10. It had about 45 minutes to get to Muzuzu, so it was supposed to land at 2 minutes past 10. You can confirm this information at page number 25 of the Commission of Report Inquiry set by the former President, His Excellency, Dr. Chakwera. It was 10 minutes after the estimated time of arrival that the flight information officer at Mzuzu claimed to have last contacted the flight at 12 minutes past 10. What I was observing there is that the aircraft should have touched down in Mzuzu at 2 minutes past 10. The information officer is contacting them at 12 minutes past 10, 10 minutes away from the touchdown time. I hope you are observing that one. And at this time, the crew said that they were 20 nautical miles away from the destination airport at Mzuzu. By this time, the airplane had already deviated from the direct course of the destination point, and it has already performed those strange maneuvers. It has already, by the time the air information controller at Mzuzu is contacting them last at 12 minutes past 10, the pilots have already embarked on those strange maneuvers. It is surprising to me that when the flight crew finally contacted the flight information officer at Mzuzu at 12 minutes past 10, the flight crew never raised any alarm about what they were going through in their approach to Mzuzu, as if everything on that flight was just normal. They just tell the flight controller that, no, we are trying to enter from Mzuzu. They are not raising any alarm. So the BFU had also asked the German meteorological service provider to compile a meteorological expert opinion concerning the weather conditions along the flight path, and in particular in the area of the accident site. However, at the time of publication of the interim report, this data had not been made available to the BFU. What I'm saying is that the BFU, for them to make a finding on the weather, they had asked their German experts, the German meteorological experts, to give them the weather opinion. But by the time they were writing the interim report, which I'm referring to, the German experts, meteorological experts, had not yet submitted their weather report. Mark that one. According to the interim BFU report, the airplane was not equipped with a cockpit voice recorder, or it was not equipped with a flight data recorder because, and I'm quoting, because these recording devices were not required by the relevant aviation regulations. End of quote. So the BFU is saying, we've not found these things on the plane because they are not required by the aviation authorities to be on the plane. That's the reason they are giving. In the interim report, BFU did not state whether or not these recording devices were never fitted at all on this aircraft at procurement, or that they were removed afterwards, or whether such recording devices had been removed afterwards, and if so, when were the recording devices removed from this aircraft. The BFU simply stated that, and I quote, these recording devices were not required by the relevant aviation regulations, end of quote. The interim report, Honorable Chair, further stated that Air Navigation Service in Lilongwe had no recorded radar data of the two flights on the day of the accident. The two flights, they are referring to the flight in the morning that departed Mzuzu, because it had gone to Mzuzu the previous night to leave the remains of late Raf Kasambara, and it spent a night there. And it left Mzuzu to come to Lilongwe to pick the vice president that is in tourage. So there are two flights on that particular day. The inward bound from Mzuzu to Lilongwe, and the outward bound from Lilongwe back to Mzuzu. those two flights. It says, the report by BFU says, the air navigation services in Lilongwe had no recorded radar data of the two flights on that particular day. That is from Lilongwe from Mzuzu to Lilongwe, and the fateful flight from Lilongwe to Mzuzu. No explanation has been offered for the absence of the recorded radar data on this fateful day for both flights. The interim report by BFU also stated that the navigation system, what they call the Garmin Area 760, Garmin Area 760, had recorded position data, GPS position and attitude above time. The recording of the accident flight began at 08:48 seconds. That is 08:46 hours, 48 seconds. That's when the recording started for that flight. That's the GPS position. At the apron of the departure airport, and it ended at 14 seconds, 16 minutes past 10. Mind you, the aeroplane impacted the ground at 16 minutes past 10. So the GPS was recording from around 46 minutes or 14 minutes to 9, and it only stopped recording at 16 minutes past, of course 14 seconds later. Because that time I think the plane stopped, or the engines stopped, whatever. And the stopping time was placed within the vicinity of the accident site. So the data, the radar, the GPS data picked the plane all the way to the vicinity of the crash at around 16 minutes past 10 for the 14 seconds later. And the GPS automatically switched off at 2:45 in the afternoon on that day. It completely switched off. The interim report by BFU also reported that a day after the accident, search and rescue personnel recovered bodies of the deceased passengers and crew from the wreckage site, and that in doing so, wreckage parts were moved from their original positions. The accident site was only cordoned off and secured after recovering the deceased bodies. This is a matter of importance, because when there's wreckage, it's supposed to be cordoned off. But the BF report says by the time they were cordoning off, pieces of the wreckage had been moved to secure the bodies of the deceased persons and crew. The interim BFU report also stated that the accident site was located about 34 kilometers, which is about 18 nautical miles southwest of the arrival point in Chikangawa forest in Nkatabe district in northern Malawi. The airplane crashed into the slope of a hill and about 2 kilometers east of a highway M1 road, and about 700 meters south of a settlement. This one you can see at page 11 of the interim BF report. So the aircraft, according to BFU, crashed about 700 meters away from a settlement where there were people there. The interim report also stated that the BFU removed and seized the warning and caution panel indicator and the Garmin Area 760 in order to read this out at their BFU lab in Germany. The emergency locator transmitter ELT-10 was mounted in the cabin of the left fuselage side next to the door. The BFU examined the ELT-10 and determined that the ELT-10 was not functioning because the battery expired in 2004. The Malawi Air Force stated that for such devices, there were no spare parts and no budget for them to acquire a new battery. Let me repeat. The BFU stated that the emergency locator transmitter, ELT-10, was mounted in the cabin of the fuselage. The BFU examined the ELT-10 and determined that the ELT-10 was not functioning because the battery had expired in 2004 rather. The Malawi Air Force had explained that such devices, there were no spares and there was no budget for them to buy the new EL-10. The report further indicated that the emergency locator panel was found in the wreckage. The switch in the cockpit was in position ARM, while the one on the ELT itself was in the position off. So there's the same switch on the panel, it is on ARM, but on the ELT, it is switched off. Those who know the technicalities, they will know what that means. The interim BF report also cited the events of the day before the accident. It stated that on 9th June 2024, the day before the accident, the flight crew went on duty at the airbase in Zomba at around midday. Then instructions were issued to fly the motor remains of a person who had died 2 days earlier and some of his family members from Chileka in Blantyre to Mzuzu. The burial was to take place the next day. The deceased persons referred to, in my opinion, are the remains of late Ralph Kasambara SC, former Minister of Justice and Attorney General, who had died in Lilongwe on or about 7th June 2024, and whose remains were taken to Blantyre on 8th June 2024, and were flown from Mzuzu to Mzuzu in the same Donia 228202K on 9th June 2024. Having flown the remains of late Ralph Kasambara SC from Blantyre to Mzuzu on 9th June 2024, the crew spent a night at Mzuzu Hotel in Mzuzu. In the evening of 9th June 2024, the flight crew received the order to pick the Vice President of the Republic of Malawi and his entourage the following day in Lilongwe and fly them to Mzuzu, and immediately after the burial to fly the Vice President back to Lilongwe so that the Vice President should see off the President who was to leave for a trip abroad that day. A thorough analysis of the interim BFU report shows that in its interim report, the BFU did not make any findings as to the probable cause of the accident. It is particularly important, Honorable Chair and members, to note that apart from citing the weather conditions at Kamuzu International Airport in Lilongwe and at Mzuzu Airport, the BFU had not received the expert opinion from the German meteorological service provider, which BFU had asked to compile meteorological expert opinion concerning the weather conditions along the flight path and in particular in the area of the accident site. It is also important, Honorable Chairman, to observe that the BFU did not state the source of information to justify its conclusion that the airplane was not equipped with a cockpit voice recorder or indeed a flight recorder. The interim report simply stated that these recording devices were not required by relevant aviation regulations in Malawi. The BFU did not cite the said relevant aviation regulations nor the version of the said aviation regulations. At the publication of the interim report, the BFU simply made two recommendations. The first recommendation was that the Minister of Defense should ensure that the aircrafts of the Malawi Air Force transporting persons should be equipped with functional emergency locator transmitter. The second recommendation was that the Minister of Transport should ensure that up-to-date information concerning radio and navigation aids in Malawi is available to aircraft crew at all times, and that the Department of Civil Aviation should check the proper functioning of the radio navigation aids and update the respective information in Malawi Aeronautical Information Publication, AIP. Honorable Chairperson and members, my analysis of the interim BFU report told me that the BFU report in its interim report was not conclusive on the cause of the accident on 10th June 2024. The interim report was published before a detailed analysis of the material facts. At the time of publication of the interim report, the BFU had not received the expert opinion from the German meteorological service provider, which BFU had asked to compile meteorological expert opinion concerning the weather conditions along the flight path and in particular in the area of the accident site. More particularly, Honorable Chairperson and members, the interim report did not attribute the air crash to bad weather. That's the interim report. By reason of the foregoing issues, therefore, Honorable Chairperson and the members, the interim report by the BFU was released in anticipation of gathering further facts for further analysis of those facts to determine the cause of the crash of the Dornier 228-202K, which killed the Vice President of the Republic of Malawi and 8 other passengers, including 3 crew members on 10th June 2024. On that score alone, Honorable Chairperson and the members of the Ad-hoc Committee, I found the interim report to be wanting. It was not conclusive. It can't bring closure to the accident. Therefore, in my capacity as Minister of Justice, I went to the second report, which was the report of the Commission of Inquiry. On the Commission of the Report Inquiry, Honorable Chairperson, it is very extensive. I therefore do not want to belabor your committee, Honorable Chair, with the detailed factual and evidence received. Allow me, if it pleases you, Honorable Chair and members of the committee, to go to my analysis of my findings of that report. Chairperson, with your permission.
You may proceed, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much. Chairperson and honorable members, I had a detailed reading and analysis of the report of the Commission of Inquiry. For purposes of consistency, let me mention the fact that the Commission of Inquiry was set up by the former President, His Excellency Dr. Lazarus Chakwera, 4 months after the accident. The Commission of Inquiry, His Excellency the former President, gave the Commission of Inquiry a period of 30 days within which to issue its report. Let me mention that my reading of the Commission of the Inquiry report shows that the Commission asked for extra time because they didn't have the time within 30 days to complete their investigations. The Commission was appointed to do the following things. These were the terms of reference. I want to have this in details for obvious reasons, because one of my findings was that the terms of reference given to the Commission were unduly narrow. So because of that, I thought the Chairperson, with your permission, if I could just read the terms of reference which were given to the Commission that time. The Commission was appointed to do the following things: conduct a thorough investigation into the circumstances prior to, during, and after the aircraft accident, from the time it departed from Kamuzu International Airport until it was discovered on 11th June 2024. My understanding of this opening statement is that the Commission is being tasked to inquire into what happened prior to the flight, during the flight, and after the flight, but limited to the time that it departed here to the time it was discovered. That's my understanding. Don't go beyond what happened earlier than the time it departed. And it says specifically inquire into the following. A, an inquiry into the manner and procedure of procuring the use of the aircraft. B, or 2, the state and performance of the aircraft the previous day and on the day of the aircraft accident, the status, condition, experience, and capacity of the crew operating the aircraft. 3, the aviation protocols followed at the point of departure and expected destination. 5, any communication between the passengers on board the aircraft and any persons on the ground during the flight. 5, notification of the missing aircraft when the Air Force was informed and the course and order of events taken in response. 6, escalation of the notification of the missing aircraft to His Excellency the President, what was communicated to the President, and what directives the President gave. 7, the search and rescue efforts from commencement through the area of focus, the point of discovering the wreckage of the aircraft on 11th June 2024. 8, consider, determine, and inquire into all aspects surrounding the death of the late Vice President and 8 others, including but not limited to establishing the cause of death for all persons on board the aircraft and the survivability of the accident. 9, consider, determine, and inquire into the circumstances and order of events to every extent possible, the events and the role and activities of various individuals between 10th and 11th June 2024, and make such inquiry and such findings and recommendations as are incidental and connected with the aircraft accident on 10th June 2024. Having analyzed the evidence that was received and how the Commission dealt with the evidence, I came to the following conclusions and findings. Just a moment, Honorable Chair. I just want to go to my findings.
You can take your time.
Yes, please. Let me start from the following findings. Honorable Chair and members, my reading of the and analysis of the Commission's report shows that the Commission began with the events leading to the aircraft accident from the funeral of late Raf Kasambara, a renowned private practice lawyer and former Minister of Justice and Attorney General, who passed away on 7th June 2024 in Lilongwe. The Commission provided details of why and how the government was involved in the funeral of Mr. Raf Kasambara, SC deceased, including the protocols followed to procure the Donia aircraft to transport the remains of late Raf Kasambara, SC, from Blantyre to Mzuzu on 9th June 2024. The Commission also had evidence of how the late Vice President was delegated to represent the President at the funeral of late Mr. Raf Kasambara, SC. On this particular point, the Commission had and considered evidence of how Honorable Richard Chimwendo-Banda ended up not representing the President at the funeral of late Mr. Raf Kasambara SC, and how Honorable Chimwendo Banda failed to board the aircraft on 10th June 2024. The Commission heard and considered the evidence about the journey of the Donia from Kamuzu International Airport to Mzuzu. The Commission heard evidence that the aircraft was scheduled to depart from Kia to Mzuzu at 9 hours with an estimated flying time of 45 minutes, but that instead the aircraft had departed at 17 minutes past 9 that morning. The Commission also heard evidence that upon takeoff, the aircraft was cleared to climb to 9,000 feet above sea level, but that upon reaching 7,000 feet, the pilots requested to maintain the altitude of about 7,000 feet because of en route weather, according to the report of the Commission of Inquiry. The Commission heard evidence that because of the low altitude, mobile phones were able to connect with their respective telecommunication networks, towers, on the ground at different points during the flight. This enabled some passengers in the aircraft to establish data communication with people on the ground at certain times during the flight. In turn, this also allowed tracking of the movement and the route of the aircraft from Kia on its way to Mzuzu Airport. You can see that those particulars at pages 25 and up to 73 of the report of the Commission of Inquiry. The Commission heard that evidence and considered the interim report by the BFU and determined that at some point the aircraft made a full circle orbit before performing 2 more full 360 degrees turns while descending between 500 feet and 200 feet above ground level, AGL. See pages 78 of the Commission of Report. However, upon considering the evidence received from witnesses and upon considering other reports on the air crash, the Commission inferred that the maneuvers performed by the crew were not a result of any emergency. The Commission held the view that these maneuvers, and I'm quoting, these maneuvers were performed by the flight crew to stay away and out of instruments meteorological conditions, IMC, in order to continue the flight under visual meteorological conditions, VMC. That would facilitate a visual approach and subsequent landing at the destination aerodrome. You can see that, Honorable Chair, at page 79 of the report of the Commission of Inquiry. The Commission also observed that if the aircraft had continued to fly at altitude of 7,000 feet, it would have arrived over Mzuzu approach area above the layer of overcast clouds, which could have rendered a descent into Mzuzu difficult, considering that there was no instrument and approach aids at Mzuzu Airport. The Commission further observed that at the point of impact, the landing gear of the aircraft was down, and the flap selection was at position 1. The Commission was unable to conclude why the crew configured their aircraft in this manner when they did not have the destination aerodrome in sight. Mind you, they were supposed to use the visual approach. Yet, at the time of impact, the Commission is saying the landing gear of the aircraft was down. Yet, they had no visual of the destination aircraft. You can see this at page 79 of the Commission of Inquiry report. Yet, the Commission had earlier on found that at the time the crew spoke with the Mzuzu control tower at about 12 minutes past 10 to inform them about the approach to Mzuzu, there was no indication from the crew that the aircraft had developed problems or any fault. There was also no indication that the pilots were under any stress, pressure, or anxiety. Mind you, Honorable Chair and the Honorable Members, by 10 minutes, 2 minutes or 12 minutes past 10, the aircraft had performed very strange maneuvers. Yet, when they are speaking last to the tower in Mzuzu, the Commission of Report accepts the position that they were not under stress, there was no pressure, and there was no anxiety from the pilots. More particularly, the Commission heard the testimony of Mr. Moyo from Mzuzu Airport Tower that at 12 minutes past 10, the aircraft had established radio communication with Mzuzu Airport Tower. And the crew informed Mr. Moyo that they were 20 nautical miles, about 37 kilometers north of Mzuzu Airport. It was also the evidence of Mr. Moyo that the pilot on the radio responded that they would go and then come through Ekwendeni. You can see page 27 of the Commission of Report Inquiry, or Commission of Inquiry report. The above matters are not consistent in my view with the finding of the Commission at the time the crew spoke with the Mzuzu Tower at 12 minutes past 10 to inform them about the approach to Mzuzu Airport. There was no indication from the crew that the aircraft had developed a problem or a fault, and there was no indication that the pilots were under any stress or anxiety. Clear in my mind, when the pilots had performed these strange maneuvers, in my opinion, they should have expressed concern when they established contact with the Mzuzu Tower at 12 minutes past 10. But according to the Commission report, they were very calm, as if nothing has happened. Furthermore, the Commission had evidence of 2 communications via WhatsApp and Telegram between the passengers in the aircraft during the flight, including the reported text message from late Inspector Chimaneni to Mrs. Winnie Nyondo at about 10 minutes past 10. Mark the time, 10 minutes past 10, which text message said, and I quote, "Too much turbulence." You can see that, Honorable Chair, at page 74 of the report of the Commission of Inquiry. Again, Honorable Chair and members, reflect back on what I said on the BFU, that the strange maneuvers start from around 10:09:50 to around 10:15 or 10:12 that morning. And mind you, the landing gear by 10:12 or 10:16, the landing gear is on down. And Mr. Late Chimaneni is texting Winnie Nyondo at 10 minutes past 10. This is 6 minutes before impact. And only says, "Too much turbulence on this flight." Maybe he's a passenger, he doesn't know what's happening. The above evidence is not consistent, in my opinion, Honorable Chair and members, with the finding by the Commission of Inquiry that there was no indication that the pilot was under any stress or anxiety. The Commission should have further interrogated the above inconsistencies in evidence, which showed that the crew did not declare an emergency at 12 minutes past 10 hours when they contacted Mzuzu Airport, and after performing very strange maneuvers where the aircraft was in some places climbing up and in other places descending down, yet it was several miles away from the destination airport at Mzuzu, and at the same time, the crew had already lowered the landing gear of the aircraft and put the flap selection to position 1, even before having sight of the destination aircraft. You can verify that in the report at page 79 of the Commission of Inquiry report. It appears that the Commission never considered these matters worth of any further investigations. It should also be noted that the President had delegated the late Vice President to represent the President at the funeral of late Kasambara, SC in Katabe, on 10th June 2024. Let me take that again, Honorable Chair. This committee should note that His Excellency the former President, Dr. Lazarus Chakwera, had delegated the Vice President, late Dr. Klaus Chilima, to represent the President at the funeral of late Laf Kasambara in Katabe on 10th June 2024. This was acknowledged by the Commission of Inquiry at page 15 of the report. It should be further noted that the aircraft was given a take-off clearance from runway 14 at Kia, and it was airborne at 17 minutes past 9. And the estimated time of arrival at Mzuzu Airport was at 2 minutes past 10. Mark those times. The aircraft was cleared to take off around, and it took off around 17 minutes past 9. And it was estimated to arrive at Mzuzu Airport at 2 minutes past 10. And it is carrying the Vice President of the country, who is going to represent the President of the country at the funeral of Raf Kasambara in Nkatabe, not in Mzuzu, in Nkatabe. It was also evidence of Mr. Moyo that he had last spoken to the crew at 12 minutes past 10, when the aircraft established radio communication or contact with Mzuzu Airport. You can verify that at page 27 of the Commission of Inquiry report. Yet, according to the information before the Commission of Inquiry, the funeral ceremony of late Raf Kasambara in Nkatabe started at 10 o'clock. And those present were actually told that the late Vice President had been delayed. I want to repeat that one, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. This aircraft is carrying the late Vice President, who has been dedicated by the State President to represent him at the funeral of late Kasambara in Nkatabe, not in Mzuzu. It is scheduled to arrive in Mzuzu at 2 minutes past 10. In my opinion, Nkatabe and Mzuzu are about 45 kilometers apart. Therefore, the Vice President was supposed to be driven from Mzuzu to Nkatabe for at least 30 minutes, which means he should have, was expected in Mzuzu, in Nkatabe rather, at around 11:15, not earlier than that. Yet, the Commission of Inquiry states that the funeral ceremony of Raf Kasambara is starting at 10 o'clock. Why? Because the people present there are told that the Vice President has been delayed. However, how could anyone have announced that the Vice President was delayed at 10 o'clock in Nkatabe, when the Vice President's arrival in Mzuzu was at 2 minutes past 10, and he was supposed to drive from Mzuzu to Nkatabe for at least 45 minutes. But somebody at the funeral announces at 10 o'clock that the Vice President has been delayed. Let's start the funeral ceremony. And the Vice President was supposed to be driven from Mzuzu to Nkatabe for at least some 35 minutes. The Vice President's arrival time at Nkatabe should have been 11 o'clock, not earlier than that day. Yet an announcement was made at 10 o'clock that the Vice President had been delayed, even before the aircraft had crashed at 16 minutes past 10. If you go to the PFU report, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, the aircraft is impacting the ground at 16 minutes past 10. At 12 minutes past 10, the pilots or the crew established their last contact with Mr. Moyo at Mzuzu. Yet, at 10 o'clock in Nkatabe, some official announces to the mourners there that the Vice President has been delayed. Let's start the funeral ceremony. And it started. This is coming from the Commission of Inquiry report. The Commission did not interrogate who had authorized the funeral service of late Raf Kasambara to start at 10 o'clock, without the late Vice President, who had been delegated by the President and who was scheduled to arrive in Mzuzu at 2 minutes past 10. Furthermore, who advised the funeral gathering at 10 o'clock that the late Vice President had been delayed. Yet the late Vice President was scheduled to land at Mzuzu Airport at 2 minutes past 10. On the probable cause of the accident, the Commission stated that from the evidence before the Commission, the aircraft accidents are attributable. That's now general. It says aircraft accidents are generally attributable to 3 factors. 1, human factor. 2, environmental factors, including weather, and technical factors. This was merely a theoretical assessment of the aircraft accidents generally, not this particular accident. But that was the conclusion of the Commission of Inquiry, that it was either human factor, environmental factor, or technical factors, because generally aircraft have accidents on the basis of those 3 factors. Ultimately, the Commission concluded that the probable cause of the accident was a combination of environmental factors and human factors. Honorable Chair and members, you can see that at page 80 of the Commission of Inquiry report. It is clear that the Commission reached the above conclusions based on probabilities rather than cogent facts. It should be noted that while the Commission had taken note of the interim report by the BFU and its content, the Commission did not allude to the fact that at the time of publication of the interim report, BFU had not yet received the expert opinion from the German meteorological services provider, which BFU had asked to compile meteorological expert opinion concerning the weather conditions along the flight path and in particular in the area of the accident site. Furthermore, the interim report by the BFU did not make any findings as to the cause of the aircraft accident. More particularly, the interim report by the BFU did not attribute the aircraft accident to bad weather. Yet the Commission of Inquiry attributes it to weather and human error. On the activation of the search and rescue, the Commission had evidence that the search and rescue was activated at 17 minutes past 1, which was exactly 4 hours from the time the aircraft had departed gear. The search and rescue mission was activated at 17 minutes past 1, which is 4 hours after the flight, which was scheduled to fly for 45 minutes and land at 2 minutes past 10 had departed gear. That's when you activate search and rescue mission. Where do you expect this airplane to be 4 hours after? The Commission established that Malawi Air Force was notified of the missing aircraft almost immediately the aircraft could not be contacted via radio, and that the acting Air Force Commander, Brigadier General Robre Ishmael, contacted the MDF commander and informed him of this information immediately. So the moment the MDF had no contact of their aircraft, it was escalated with the MDF ranks. However, the search and rescue mission is only activated 4 hours later. Notwithstanding the above evidence, the Commission found that the MDF commander alerted the President at 11:35 hours that the Vice President had gone to Mzuzu in the aircraft and that there was bad weather in Mzuzu. This was at 11:35 when the MDF commander contacted the President and informed him that the Vice President has gone to Mzuzu, but that there's bad weather in Mzuzu. The Commission further found that the President had understood the communication from the MDF commander as an alert to the effect that the aircraft was failing to land in Mzuzu due to bad weather and may be on its way back to Kia. So it would appear the Commission is saying the President was informed by MDF commander that the plane is failing to land in Mzuzu, and in his imagination the President understood that message to mean that the aircraft was flying back from Mzuzu back to Lilongwe because of bad weather, and this was at 11:35 hours. It appears that the Commission's findings that the probable cause of the accident was bad weather and human factor was motivated by the above communication between the MDF commander and the President. That's my opinion. My opinion that the Commission is insisting that the probable cause of the accident is bad weather, because the MDF commander at 11:35 is informing the President that the aircraft is failing to land because of bad weather, and the President thinks that it's coming back to Lilongwe. On the suspension of the search, the Commission received evidence that the search and rescue mission on 10th June 2024 was very disjointed due to various factors, including lack of systemic and strategic approach to the search in Chikangawa forest, and lack of knowledge of what to do and where to start the search. The Commission had evidence that at 22 hours on 10th June 2024, the Commissioner of Police North consulted other stakeholders and decided tactical pause in the search of the aircraft. The Commission did not ask further questions as to the rationale for this called tactical pause in the search of the aircraft, which had carried the Vice President of the country. At 10 o'clock in the night, there is what is called a tactical pause in the search and rescue. On the discovery of the aircraft wreckage on 11th June 2024, the Commission heard that at around 9 o'clock, a team of the Air Force, including Colonel Mukokwe, arrived in Chikangawa to join the search. A team of senior police officers, including Commander of Police, Co-Commissioner of Police, Atkins Mwanga, the head of operations at the National Police Headquarters, Deputy Commissioners of Police, Mr. Mitai, Assistant Commissioner of Police, Alex Simenti, the officer in charge, Airport Police, decided to undertake supervision of the search teams. The police team was joined by the MDF team, led by Second Lieutenant Odedi Mwenewanda, a platoon commander based at Kasitu camp. The Commission heard that the first persons at the accident site were 4 senior police officers of the Malawi Police Service, 4 MDF soldiers, 2 sawyers, those who are cutting planks, 2 officers from Ntungwa Forest Office, and 2 unidentified persons. The Commission did not identify the names of the first persons at the search site. It is strange that the Commission accepted evidence which merely said that the first persons at the crash site were 4 senior police officers without identifying the names, 4 MDF soldiers without identifying the names, 2 sawyers without identifying the names, and 2 unidentified persons without identifying the names. The Commission was not transparent regarding the identities of individuals who first saw the wreckage. The Commission should have made every effort, in my opinion, to ascertain and disclose the names of the first persons to be at this crash site. It is therefore concerning, in my opinion, that individuals whose identities remain unknown to date were the ones who first saw the aircraft wreckage and dead bodies of the passengers and crew, including the late Vice President. It is also particularly concerning that the Commission merely stated that 2 sawyers and 2 unidentified persons to have been part of the first persons present at the accident site. Additionally, the Commission had evidence of gunshots in proximity to the crash site, but the Commission did not conduct any further interrogations as to the truth of these gunshots. On this point, it is clear that the Commission failed to conduct a rigorous investigation to determine whether these reported gunshots actually occurred or didn't occur. The issue is significant and must be further investigated. Furthermore, the Commission seems to have accepted the evidence of Colonel Kandulu and Colonel Mudokwe regarding the plane not catching fire upon impact as an absolute truth. The Commission based its findings and conclusions on such testimonies. The Commission did not interrogate further the fact that the aircraft had fuel for about 4 hours and that at the time of impact, yet there is no evidence of the aircraft catching fire on impact or any spillage of jet fuel to the crash site, as if the fuel tanks were empty. These matters need further interrogations. The explanation accepted by the Commission that the plane's high wings prevented ignition is not convincing without further interrogation of this particular aspect in the report. The above analysis of the report of the Commission of Inquiry shows that the Commission of Inquiry was constrained in its scope of inquiry by the narrow terms of reference. As such, the report lacks necessary depth in the interrogation of certain aspects of the plane crash, and further, the report contains various inconsistencies, in my opinion, which must be reconciled. The above factors, therefore, justify further inquiry to be conducted by this committee into this plane crash that killed the late Vice President of Malawi and 8 others on 10th June 2024. With a wider scope and other possible connected issues, like the relationship between the late Ralph Kasambara, SC, and the circumstances of his death, of late Ralph Kasambara, SC, and the death of late Vice President, both of whom died within a space of 72 hours, back to back, in mysterious circumstances. It is also important to note that prior to the aircraft accident involving the military plane crash, a military plane herein, the late Vice President had been discharged from corruption, a corruption case in the Financial Crimes Court, in which the MDF had vehemently resisted to release certain documents to the late Vice President, on the grounds that the documents sought by the Vice President to be released were sensitive documents bordering on national security. I thought this is a matter which this committee should also be aware of. And this plane belongs to MDF, the same MDF which was resisting to release evidence in the corruption case of late Saulos Chilima. It may be important to expand the scope of any further inquiry to the corruption case against the late Vice President and any possible connections to the documents which the MDF resisted to release to the late Vice President in connection with this aircraft accident. In view of the above analysis, the report of the Commission of Inquiry, in my opinion, was not conclusive on its inquiry into the aircraft accident involving the Malawi Air Force Donia 228, which crashed at Ntungwa in Kadabe on 10th June 2024. Honorable Chairperson and honorable members, I also did analyze the final report of the BFU. I can summarize this one in a very brief because of my findings, Honorable Chairperson, without going details of the facts. Honorable Chairperson, in my analysis of the final BFU report, it concluded without receiving the meteorological report which they had requested from the German meteorological service provider. However, it accepted the evidence in the Commission of Inquiry report, which relied on the evidence of the people on the ground in Mzuzu and Chikangawa, that the weather was bad on the flight path. And the BFU therefore concluded that the aircraft accident was attributable to bad weather. You may recall, Honorable Chairperson and members, that in my findings of the analysis of the interim BFU report and the Commission of Inquiry report, I found the two reports to be wanting. However, the final BFU report relies heavily, in my opinion, on the findings and evidence accepted by the Commission of Inquiry for it to conclude its findings, instead of relying on the technical aspects of the flight, including the weather report from the German Meteorological Service, which they never read. By the time of the publication of the final report, the BFU had not received the German Meteorological report. For these reasons, Honorable Chairperson, I made the following recommendations to His Excellency, the State President. I did recommend, as Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, to the President, His Excellency the President, Professor Arthur Peter Mutharika, that if the President accepts my opinion and it pleases him, he may wish to exercise his powers under Section 2(1) of the Commission of Inquiry Report Act of the Laws of Malawi to appoint a fresh inquiry into the aircraft accident involving the Malawi Air Force Donia 228 on 10th June 2024. I further recommended to His Excellency that the terms of reference for the fresh Commission of Inquiry may be widened to include other aspects which I noted, including conduct a thorough investigation into the circumstances leading to the aircraft accident at Ntungwa in Chikangawa in Katabe and the death of late Vice President and 8 others on 10th June 2024. Conduct a thorough investigation into the circumstances leading to the arrest of late Vice President and his subsequent discharge from his corruption case, which involved the MDF, and identify any leakages to the aircraft accident on 10th June 2024. Conduct a thorough investigation into the procurement of the Donia aircraft to carry the late Vice President and 8 others on 10th June 2024. Conduct a thorough investigation into the circumstances leading to the death of Raf Kasambara on 7th June 2024 and identify any leakages to the death of late Vice President, if any, and 8 others on 10th June 2024. Conduct a thorough investigation into the procurement of the Donia to carry the remains of late Raf Kasambara, NCC, from Blantyre to Mzuzu on 9th June 2024, and how the aircraft was handled after carrying the remains of late Raf Kasambara on 9th June, prior to carrying the late Vice President and 8 others on 10th June 2024. Those were the recommendations which I made to His Excellency the President. And when Parliament was sitting, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, when I answered the question under Order 69 of the your standing orders, I did summarize these findings to the August House, in which I informed your August House Parliament that His Excellency had decided that instead of a presidential inquiry, it must be a parliamentary inquiry, hence leading to your committee, ad-hoc committee this morning, which is starting the inquiry this morning. I thank you very much for your attention. If there are any issues that you want me to raise, I'm available to respond to any questions. Thank you very much, Chair.